Welcome back to today's edition of The Agenda with me, Yvonne Ridley, and studio guests Salim Salam, Ben Harris-Quinney and Leon Musavi. As we went into the break, I asked who said there can be no higher law in journalism than to tell the truth and to shame the devil, remain detached from the great. They were the words of the late US journalist Martin Lippmann, who also said a long life in journalism convinced me many presidents ago that there should be a large airspace between a journalist and the head of state. The implication being that some journalists seem quite happy to sit at the table of power and be spoon-fed propaganda. Ben, how close do you think Western journalists do sit at that table and take the crumbs that are thrown from them without question?
Well, I wouldn't limit it to Western journalists, but I think journalists the world over, there are those that seek to take a more independent stance and approach, but there are certainly those that position themselves very close to power, and quite frankly, it's probably lazy journalism to do so, but it is going to get you a lot of lead stories, and the headlines of the day will probably be in some way regarding the government or related to a government response to a particular matter, and therefore if you happen to be the government's man to go to set the news agenda, then you are probably going to get a lead story out of it. So it's rational, quite frankly.
If I can just make a quick correction there, I inadvertently said Martin Lippmann, and it should have been Walter Lippmann, of course, who'd said those words. But in response to what you just said there, Ben, if I can bring you in, Salim.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. Being close to power corrupts as much as power itself corrupts. And there's no question there's a very close interaction between the owners and editors of newspapers and governments. Also, some newspapers have particular affiliations with certain political parties. So the Daily Mirror, for example, will be closer to the Labour Party than the Mail, which will probably be closer to or the Telegraph, closer to the Conservative Party. So there are those kinds of relationships. But if I very quickly just wanted to pick up the one point that Ben made before the break, which was about this whole word terrorist. You see, if we use these labels without thinking, then we don't have to think about what's behind it. So the Muslim terrorist becomes a kind of a brand, you know, it's something that you can just say, boom, put it in front of people and everybody will understand what you're talking about. It means we don't actually have to look at what's going on in Israel, or we don't have to look at what's going on anywhere else in the world. And the same thing happened here with the IRA. They weren't called Catholic terrorists, they were nationalists, Irish nationalists. And however much you labelled them or tried to stop them getting onto the media, you had to eventually deal with them politically. That was the only way, and that's what's got to be done with a lot of these cases.
Let me bring in Leon at this point, because if you could visually differentiate between Protestants and Catholics, do you think that the word Catholic, or the phrase Catholic terrorist, would have been more prevalent? Because, of course, you're right, the IRA were just labelled terrorists. There wasn't an adjective that went in there.
Yeah, well, I think what this shows really is that there is a demonisation of different people in the media. It isn't just Muslims who are demonised. There are other people who are demonised. White people can still be and are still demonised in the media today, especially the white working class, for example, or other white communities, maybe Polish or the East Europeans. And we should be aware of different forms of prejudice within the media. But I think the thing about the propaganda, I mean, the example that I'm thinking of is Alex Ferguson, which, as you probably know, he doesn't speak to the BBC because he had some confrontations with them.
This is the manager of Manchester United, for anybody out there who may not have heard of him.
Right, maybe. But the point is that Alex Ferguson has boycotted the media, or the BBC in particular, because they reported in a way that he didn't like. And this is a great example to show the way in which, on a broader scale, governments, politicians, can also set the agenda of the media, because the media know, journalists know, that if they don't stick to the script, if they challenge the official account, that's going to have consequences for their career. Now, I'm a Manchester City fan, so I don't want to see Alex Ferguson on TV particularly, but when it comes to politicians, journalists need to have access to politicians, and these are the ideas, they're not my ideas, these are Noam Chomsky's ideas, which is explained so well in Manufacturing Consent.
Well, Ben, I mean, how comfortable are you with the relationship that lobby journalists, for instance, in Westminster and in the White House have with the people in power?
Well, I am fairly uncomfortable with that relationship, and however, I do see it as a fact of life. As Leon said, if Alex Ferguson decides not to speak to the BBC, then it puts the BBC in an awkward position, and if they were to be given an opportunity to speak with Alex Ferguson again, they would probably take a very soft approach to that interview. But I think, one of your reports earlier made the point that we are living in an era of citizen journalism. And whilst I am concerned that there are certain media groups that are perhaps too close to governments of any kind, not just in the West, I would also say that with the internet, with YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, we do actually have the opportunity to look into an event and get a wide range of differing opinions.
Do you
many
think
of
it's
those not
the
from the heart of
public's
government.
duty to do that, though? I mean, it's a lot of hard work, if you can't trust the newspaper you're buying and you then have to go onto the internet to seek corroboration.
You might ask the question, why buy a newspaper at all? I mean, many more people today are getting their news via the internet, via blogs that are sort of tailored to their unique set of interests, which a newspaper might not be. And so, yeah, I think that's an era we're living in when perhaps, the printed media is starting to find it more difficult to engage with the general public.
I mean, do you think that the viewers and the readers are becoming more discerning, more demanding?
Well, that's a difficult question. It depends what you mean by discerning. I think people are tending to look for more specific media that they are interested in. So, perhaps if you're particularly interested in entertainment news, you might not be so interested in international affairs. You would tailor your media sourcing to, maybe the E channel or something, where you're not going to get a lot of Middle Eastern politics, but you are going to get a lot of, what Tom Cruise has been up to recently. But I think with regard to responsibility, if you're someone who takes an interest in global politics or in local politics, it is absolutely incumbent upon you to do research beyond just a press release given by government.
Well, before Salim jumps in, there's a VT, and the Agenda's Mohammed Walji went to get the public's view in Fleet Street, and this is what they told him.